Welcome to the podcast. My name is Taylor Avakian, and I am here with an incredible friend and professor, attorney, real estate investor. He's the master of all trades, I like to say. And Joseph Soleiman. Joseph,
Thank you for having me, Taylor.
thanks for being here, man.
I've
Appreciate
been
it.
looking forward to being on your show.
I know. We've been talking about this for a long time, and it's going to be a good one. So I want to start off with what's going on right now. We're filming this at the end of February, and Los Angeles has some fires that are going on, and the state of the market is in, I would say, disarray. You were affected by these fires. Can you
Yes.
tell me about the situation and what's going on?
Sure. Yeah. I've yet to go back. We've just been given access, actually, as of yesterday. But I've yet to go back. The community I live in is called Sunset Mesa. It's technically in Malibu, but just adjacent to Pacific Palisades. It was an idyllic mid-century, little community of probably about 500 or so homes. And I'd say probably about 5% of the homes are left standing. It is utter devastation, akin to, what you'd see in Hiroshima or, a nuclear bomb being dropped. My home does stand. I have not gone back. Even those homes that are standing, unfortunately, have to deal with issues related to environmental remediation. These homes were built in the 50s, in the 60s. And so there is asbestos that's turned into asbestos ash. We have, lead-based paints. And so there's a lot of uncertainty around, the health and the viability of going back until there's some environmental remediation.
Have they given you a timeline on when they think that's going to be remediated and or you can go back? Because the other question I have, first, timeline, and second, like, to go back to what? Obviously, you have a home, but all of your neighbors' houses are burned down.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
I mean, what's the timeline? And
So the county is the agency that would be overseeing and responsible for scheduling the environmental and the actual physical damage cleanup. And unfortunately, as of this show, there is no timeline yet provided. So we don't know. A lot of us are asking each other through Slack forums and WhatsApp forums and, our homeowners association to try to get information. But we don't really have a timeline yet for that. Just this morning, even though my home is standing, I got a message from a friend of mine whose home is not standing that it might take, 12 months before I realistically can even go into my standing home.
no way.
That was just before I actually came to sit down with you this morning.
Holy crap.
So there's a lot of uncertainty, and that translates into the community issue that you're touching on. I have twin boys who were going to Malibu Middle School, who we've been trying to, we're now all evacuated, so we're trying to get them back into school. As of Tuesday, they were to go back, and the drive now for us is like 2 hours to get them to class and then bring them home. There's no bus service. PCH is closed, so there's a long, commute time there. And so there's this diaspora that's happening relative to all of the kids, that have now had to find new homes with their families, that are going, in some cases, to new schools. And so the sense of community has been devastated. And it's going to take some time. It will, I've heard, crazy long estimates. But no one really knows. That's one of these misinformation factors that I really guard against. I don't want to put something out there. But it takes time to simply build a neighborhood. It takes time to build a home and replicate that through individuals doing it, through individual insurance programs and individual contractors. We're not talking about tract homes being done by, getting the Toll Brothers or, KB Homes in there and just getting economies of scale. And by the way, that would be the ideal way of doing it, is to give, get homeowners associations together, get that optionality to everyone. If they want to opt in, they have, the right to have these home builders build their home. They'll have maybe 3 or 4 different options to pick from in terms of aesthetic, and they'll get it within a certain time and a fixed price.
How many people you think would actually do that? Because the demographic, I would say, for the Palisades and part of Malibu is more of an affluent nature, one where they like to have some individuality and uniqueness.
That's right.
Do you think people would actually do that?
It's fantasy.
Yeah.
It's fantasy. The reality is it's not going to happen. It's the proverbial, it's like being Jewish, I can say this. It's like the Jew that's, you get 2 Jews in a room, you get 50 different opinions. It's the same thing, right? I mean, you really have, I think, that element here People absolutely see this as a personal upgrade opportunity, and studies have shown that actually when fires happen and people rebuild, homes get bigger, they get nicer.
But
And
isn't there an issue with Newsom coming out and basically capping the amount that you can rebuild to
right.
110% of what
Yeah,
was there?
that is an issue. It's not only an issue, that's correct. That did happen. He did also set aside coastal commission and CEQA requirements.
Which
And
sequels terrible. I mean,
right, I mean, that would set you back to a couple years. Although maybe not, notwithstanding that it's off the table for home rebuilds or fire rebuilds is a very valuable thing.
yeah.
There are limitations to what he said. You can't do ADUs. That wasn't accounted for. It does have to be on the same footprint. So that's kind of a loss because,
Mhm.
sometimes homes were built, before some of these
In
streets
the
were built.
60s.
Yeah. Or, in some cases, the 20s
Yeah.
before you had, these streets that were built the way they were. So they're not really oriented correctly on the lots.
Mhm.
So doesn't mean that you can't rebuild. It just means you have to go through the, more traditional process, which will potentially cause some more, reviews and delays.
Interesting. And have you been contacted? Because one of the first things that, again, broker mindset, right? One of the first things that I got reached out to about was opportunities to purchase. People
Right.
are like, "Hey, what's the status of wanting to buy these parcels
Right.
and have potentially value and land?" I just saw one of the first homes burned down to be listed was listed for $100 a square foot,
Interesting.
which for me is incredibly cheap
Yeah.
for that area. That's what
Yeah.
we're selling affordable, 100% affordable land to build these
Yeah.
properties on. The fact that Palisades homes were selling for or offered at that price was very intriguing to me. But then I even went to some people, some investors, and was like, "Hey, is this a good deal?" And they said they don't know yet.
That's right. And first of all, I'm offended you didn't call me. But all kidding aside, I've had probably 15 to 20 people reach out to me, both from within and outside of the community who are interested in doing this. I have access to funds set aside specifically to do this by these people. The funds are available. And uh, the issue is, first off, the Department of Real Estate put a notice out there. You cannot solicit anyone
Yeah,
on these. So it's it's uncouth. It's inappropriate. People are going through loss,
totally.
grieving. So that's number one. It's just not the right thing to do right now.
Yeah.
And the second part of it is, what are these things worth? You hit it right on. It's so early. The market's not there. $100 a foot really sounds low. Some people are simply going to be, equity rich and cash poor and are going to need to get
Hmm.
out of these what were wonderful assets turned liabilities. You have senior, elderly folks, in some cases, first generation owners of some of these homes that were, originally built, in some cases, second generation owners that inherited it from their parents.
Hmm.
And so the basis was very low. With that low basis, or no basis, frankly, because
Yeah.
over time they've paid everything off, so there's no debt, allowed for a very um, favorable lifestyle. And sometimes these people wouldn't have the income if they were to be, purchased today. So those that didn't have the income are going to be the ones that are, I think, going to put these lots on the market for sale. And frankly, those that are just, later stages of their life, if this process takes 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they're simply going to say, I want to leave, the latter part of
Hmm.
my live the latter part of my life in peace and harmony and not building a home. And so those are going to be opportunities for investors down the line.
Did you have any friends who said, "I'm out of California," or "I'm moving to San Diego or Orange County," or they're just LA,
Yeah.
I'm gone? Did you have any friends who said
So
that?
it, I'll tell you, of all of my friends in the neighborhood who lost their homes, and I say there's 10 to 12 of them.
Okay.
Virtually everyone in my neighborhood, actually thinking about it, everyone in my neighborhood is rebuilding.
Wow.
Now, of the friends that are outside of the neighborhood in the Palisades, there are a few that have said, you know, I don't know if I want to be in this community anymore. And that really brings in a more political dynamic to the
Mm.
conversation, having to do, with such a deep blue state, having to do with, you know, state, city, county issues that have not been really homeowner friendly, haven't been investor friendly, and haven't been school friendly. Schools have been suffering in terms of things. Firefighter funding
Yeah.
friendly, police funding friendly.
Uh-huh.
These are issues that homeowners really care about. And in our state, sadly, the attention has gone towards social issues so deeply that it's taken the focus and attention off issues that matter to people who actually have uh, constituency, that have uh, agency, and have planted their flags in the state for the long term by way of buying a home.
Mhm. And I want to circle back around to your background a little bit too, because obviously you're well educated. You're an attorney by trade initially, and
Yes.
then now a professor as well who teaches law, and then in the private real estate space. So I know that probably gives you a good insight into how some of these laws and things are written.
Yes.
What are the problems and issues that we have in California right now? And from a legal perspective, and also from what is occurring and what you've been talking to your investors and your other friends who own real estate, and then the neighbors, like where are we going wrong?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I first of all, I'm going to say that I work really hard in my class. I teach at Pepperdine, as you alluded to, and I teach in the business school. And I work really hard. And I teach in the business school. I teach a real estate class in the business school, and I touch a real estate class that touches on legal issues. So those are fraught with potential political landmines, and it can be a very hyper politicized conversation, which I try to skirt. I
Sure.
don't want to make um, politicized uh, and extreme comments going, either direction, because
You're trying to educate.
yeah, and it's an objective thing, right? And I think that with that said, there are serious mismanagement of our state, our county, and city levels that has happened due to socialization of ideas that are so uh, extreme, that are so really blue state, issues,
Hmm.
right, that have been really taken to an extreme. Um, there is a kill the rich, mentality that's been, I think, very, very pervasive in our
Hmm.
politics. There's been developer bad, homeowner bad, landlord bad mentality and sentiment that's been really, I think, irresponsibly spread by politicians. And the result of it is, getting onto, supervisorial roles, city council roles, people who are anti-capitalistic, which is one of the foundations of why my family came here.
Hmm.
My families were refugees. We came from a totalitarian country that was originally very, capitalistic and democratically, run, to going very totalitarian. And, the United States is the bastion of, freedom, property rights,
Hmm.
and, with that, capitalism. Capitalism has been made a bad word. Capitalism, supply and demand dynamics have been uh, deemed to be a theory that is not valued.
Hmm.
That the invisible hand that Adam Smith talked about is bad. Well, that's a perversion, and that perversion, I think, has been um, tainting our politics. And I think we have politicians who don't, um, manage resources correctly. We have uh, mayors who are not, thinking about their constituency. There's no good reason for a mayor to have had
To be in
cur-
Ghana.
in Africa when
Yeah.
the people of her city are literally running from
Yeah.
fires.
Yeah.
So huge missteps, bad looks, and now I think there's a lot of
It feels like people are realizing that something needs to change, and I don't know if it's from the President Trump one, so people are all leaning that way.
coming out of the woodworks to say, you know what, I'm a closet maybe
There's so
red,
many.
yeah,
There's
I'm a
so
closet
many.
red
I've been
person.
seeing on Twitter too, like Sam Altman came out and said misspoke about the right wings. It's people are coming out and being like, okay, we've all been thinking that this is kind of crazy, but now it feels
Yeah.
like it was, and
Right.
so they're not in a position where they have to, maybe they have to deal with their friends who don't feel that way, but
Look,
overall, from a business perspective too.
absolutely. And I think that this is the thing. We have to be nuanced in our conversations. It became politically incorrect to say that you're pro-business in the state of
Mhm.
California. It became politically incorrect to say that, you know what, it's not okay to have anyone doing anything anywhere they want. Rule of law, we pass laws, but we're not going to enforce them. There's no loitering laws being enforced. There's no trespassing laws being enforced. There's no jaywalking laws now being enforced expressly as really mandate by our governor. And so what is, again, one of our bastions in the United States governance of law is being, eroded over and over and over again. Look, I'm not, I don't want to come across again as one-sided on this
Mhm.
matter. One of the reasons I think we live in California is socially, we're very open-minded, and I think most people here are aligned in that. Perhaps some don't want to go as extreme to the left on social issues, but people generally lean left, and that's fine. What's been, I think, overlooked is how the social elements and voting just blue and being a deep blue state um, causes there to be problems in business and specifically in real estate. We have ULA that was passed, and it was completely passed uh, as a eat the rich concept, as a mansion tax when frankly, it's just a complete misrepresentation of what it is. It
Mhm.
is impacting commercial real estate sales, as you know, given what you are involved with. We have national private equity, we have national investors, private equity firms. No one wants to come into the state due to regulations and due to things like ULA, the mansion
Mhm.
tax, which actually impacts commercial properties. And so these are the kinds of changes that we need to make. And I think we're at a precipice or at maybe an inflection point where we have to come together more as business leaders, more as real estate leaders, more as educators as well. The state of California just recently passed its state rent control law. We knew when the original rent stabilization ordinances, whether it was Los Angeles or Santa Monica, that were passed in the 1970s, were bad for business. Law and economics professors back then wrote books about how rent control is bad. It's bad for rental stock. It's bad for quality of housing. And yet, here we are, uh, 50 years
Mhm.
later, 45 years later, and not only are we not rolling back things that are bad for our industry, bad for our society, but actually imposing more. And that's caused people to literally, put a red X mark on our state for investment purposes. And those who have invested are really disincentivized from investing in their own properties. People who want to invest in their
Mhm.
properties and who want to better the lives of their tenants. And so it's hastening this real um, conflict between the evil landlord and
Mhm.
the downtrodden tenant, which really is it's a false narrative created by our politicians.
100%, 'cause they know who their voters are, and they wanna appease to that, population, but people don't realize that it actually is against the people that they're trying to protect because it
Absolutely.
makes the problem worse.
Absolutely.
I'm curious to know, as someone, who is in the collegiate school system, right, who has been known and there's been a lot of talk of, like, super, left wing and, not necessarily the politics, but genuinely, do you feel, and Pepperdine's a private school, but
Yes.
do you feel like the upper educations, the collegiates, the colleges, stuff like that, are they part of are they pushing a certain narrative? Like, does that feel like, and I don't wanna get you in trouble, so don't say anything
No,
that doesn't have
yeah.
to, but do
Well,
the students come to you and be like, you say
I totally understand what you're asking, and I'm gonna answer it by saying that I actually went to you guys, everyone can look up where I went to school,
yeah,
but I went to UCLA undergrad.
okay.
I went to law school in San Francisco, also at the in the UC system. And there's no doubt that in the UC system that you are. instructed by extreme, liberal thought leaders. And I graduated a long time ago, and it's clear that that has only gotten worse in those
Mhm.
systems. Uh, where I teach is a little bit, it's reputed to be a lot more on the other end of the spectrum, due to the fact that, I mean, we've had administrators in Republican, Kenneth Starr was at Pepperdine, so it's not a
Yeah.
secret that it's a little bit more of a conservative institution. That doesn't mean that we don't teach, you know, facts.
Mhm.
That there isn't a mandate. Okay, you must teach this or that, uh, and that's why it's my class is very apolitical. I like to show both sides of every narrative and every issue. So that said, we don't have, I think, as much extremism, in a
Mhm.
private school setting,
Sure.
which is perverse. You'd think in a public institution you would have more of that open, dialogue between um, the sides,
More of a neutral stance.
more of a neutral stance.
Yeah.
But perversely, it's been elevated to the private institutions because they don't have the requirements that are being mandated by our governmental entities on our public institutions on a private institution. So I think it's really telling of how extreme our governance has gone.
Man, it's kinda crazy. I went to University of Alabama, which is probably the opposite of what a lot of
Yeah.
California,
Yeah.
institutions and schools are, so I didn't
Great
have to.
football, though.
Great football,
Yeah.
incredible great football. Even then, though, I felt like, "Okay, I just gotta do what I gotta do," right? I know how I feel and believe, and here's my goal, and here's what I wanna achieve, and so that's where I'm trying to go, and
So let me ask you something. When you said you were gonna go to California from Alabama,
yeah.
right? You said that to your friends. Were they like, "You're crazy for going to such a, crazy liberal state?"
Well, I'm from California, so
Okay.
it was kind of like, okay, you're just going back home and things like that. So, yes, people in other states think California is absolutely insane. That is 100% a true fact.
I look, I was just at a conference yesterday. People come in from the East Coast, from the Midwest, and all.
IMN, right?
I was at the
Was it
IMN,
good?
the
You
private.
spoke,
I did. I spoke at the IMN. I spoke on a panel about adaptive reuse issues.
and what were they saying? What was the sentiment?
Well, first of all, everyone thinks California is an insane place to do business, and
Yeah.
it is. Again, same issues. They At the same time, it was funny because we were talking about, cap rates. What are cap rates on multifamily? How can you justify, in one case, a sub 5% cap rate on multifamily? And meanwhile, it's beautiful out. It is literally,
Do you see the weather map today
no,
of the country?
I did not.
Okay, so California was like 55, 65. Everywhere else in the country besides Miami was like 22 degrees.
Yeah,
And I'm like, okay, here's the map. Here's why people want to live
it's the
on
weather
the West
tax,
Coast.
right? It's the weather
Sure.
tax. Everyone's look, and you can't deny the following: people from all over the country, strike that. People from all over the world see California as one of the two states in the United States that they want to be in. Three states now, maybe between California, New York, and maybe Florida.
Mhm.
And it's undeniable that we have amazing resources. It's undeniable that we have amazing beaches. It's a bummer. I haven't been able to surf now, and I'm not going to be able to surf for who knows how long, right?
I wouldn't
So
go in
what
the water.
becomes the raison d'etre to go to Malibu? I can't, I live there. I can't go home. I used to go there, and, you know, even when I didn't live there, I'd surf Malibu. Now I
Mhm.
live there and I can't surf Malibu. So it's the amenities that draw people into our state. Point being that there is nowhere that has. I used to say in high school to my friends, let's go do one of those ski trips where we can go to whatever mountain high,
Mhm.
locally, and then go surf the
You
next
can
day.
surf and snowboard
Surf
the same day.
same day. So it's a unique space.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful, state with mismanagement. There was a time when our schools were the best public schools in the country. There was a time when our roads were the best freeways, the only freeways in the country. Freeways started in our state, for God's sake. And, there's just been a lot that has drawn people here. So our success was also our downfall. It could be our downfall because we have people coming in droves, and demand drivers has ballooned our population to 13 million people in the county of Los Angeles alone. That's larger than probably 95% of the countries in the world.
That's crazy.
So we really have this amazing demand driver that's not going to go away. For as much as right now we have a black eye as a place that you know institutions and investors want to stay away from, you cannot deny the fact that multifamily, for example, which is your specialty, you know, how many buildings do you know that are less than close to 90 something percent occupied?
All of them.
All of them. Even the shittiest of shitty buildings are occupied,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So why is that? Well, we do have a housing shortage, but it's just the demand drivers. There's always, I always say, like, there's always that person that's taking the bus from the Midwest with stars in their eyes that get dropped off in front of the Hollywood sign and want to be an actor, model, actress, model, whatever, right?
Hollywood. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there are drivers here, indubitably. Um, Now it's up to our leaders or governmental leaders to bring more entertainment business in. Don't let the production die on the vine here. You guys have a good thing. You're losing edge to London, Atlanta, Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
We need to beef that up. You had aerospace in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
The airplane was invented virtually. Well, the aerospace industry really took off here.
Mm-hmm.
Again, our policies, removed it. The GM, factory used to be in Van Nuys. It's gone. So a lot of that, and again, it has to do with our national trends and, with manufacturing leaving, of course, the country, but also, we're not creating an environment that makes Nissan want to, forget Nissan, but Volkswagen Group want to.
There's no new industries that are being created, right? No one wants to come to start something from an industry perspective to Los Angeles or to California.
And that has to do with government,
Yeah.
right? Government has to give incentives, tax incentives, and housing would be, a way of doing it. There is, I think, this fear by our politicians in giving industry incentives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because if they do it here, then someone else is going to yell and scream there. So that's part of the extremism. That's also part of the problem of being a one-party state for so long. We had Republican governors. Governor Reardon was an attorney. He was a Republican mayor. We had Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
He maybe could have been a better governor for us, but he had his own personal problems. But he did fairly good things for the state from a business standpoint. We have gone away from that true north compass in being able to see that business, schools, our housing element really matter. And by just putting, homelessness issues and DEI issues and social, cultural wars at the forefront of people's, mindset is not working.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get back to the basics.
So I agree with you a lot, and I love business and I love entrepreneurship. And so where my mind goes, because again, I'm biased too, because I do business here. My business has been built here. I have a different perspective too on the actual intricacies of Los Angeles and where the business opportunities are. Because everything you're telling me and what I'm hearing, and when I think about this, I'm like, okay, barrier to entry, barrier to entry, barrier to entry, brain damage. Like, it is hard to do business, which for someone with a personality like myself who loves doing hard things and realizes, like, blue oceans where you want to,
Yeah.
play the space and
Yeah.
play where other people don't want to go.
Yes.
If you have either specific knowledge or connections or some sort of differentiator to give you a better leg up in creating wealth and opportunities here, with the demand still being what it is, that to me screams
This is where you want to be.
right?
I love you're saying this. Absolutely. So you were asking, why, I think we had a conversation before,
Yeah.
like, about being in state versus out of state.
Sure.
I told you how I actually started my career by doing deals out of state. all my first deals, I couldn't break the barrier to getting deals done in California. I was an M&A attorney, early 2000s. I got out of that business. I'm like, look, the M&A business and the purchase and sale of businesses and the purchase of real estate are really cousins. They're very similar. So, okay, great. Let me dip my toe into that. We couldn't make deals work for investors in state, so we were going to places like Florida, places like Las Vegas.
What were the return metrics you guys were trying to hit?
Well, it's a different era then.
No, I know,
We were
but
giving our investors in some cases up to a 10% cash on cash return, net of fees.
wow.
Yes, different time, different era. And back then, interest rates were somewhere between 5.5% and 6%.
So why were they that then and different now?
So I think it was a pre-institutionalization of real estate. Institutions got into every sector of real estate from going back about 20, 25 years ago
Mhm.
in a very meaningful way, where we were just kind of like the redheaded stepchild of the investment community. That changed 20, 25 years ago, where the real estate business was really run by localized family offices. That changed 20, 25 years ago. Private equity got in a meaningful way. Sponsorship, of sponsored deals, blew up.
Syndication.
Syndication. Back then, syndication was happening on a much more discrete basis. And then, it really had its kind of double peak, up until kind of pre-COVID,
Yeah.
where everyone coming out of high school
Yeah.
was like, I'm going to set up my
It
own
was a
business.
social media too. Everyone's making all this money.
Oh, that's
I own 10,000
Yeah.
units, right?
Yeah,
They're
and
like,
that's really a big, driver as well over the last 10 years, social media. Um, absolutely, information has been really leveled,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
In that way. And so the barrier to information gathering is gone. Everyone has closer to perfect information. You don't know something, you Google it. You don't know something, you get your AI chatbot to give you the
Okay,
answer.
so now AI
Yes.
pretty much gives you a better answer than if you call up your buddy or attorney.
Absolutely, yeah. No, and as an attorney, I can tell you how many, people actually say, "Look, I've had this happen." If someone called me up, actually speaking of AI, let me actually first of all put what I want you to do for me through the AI, whatever
Yeah.
platform that I'm using, and then I'll have you look at it, right? And so that's going to happen a lot more. That's another conversation altogether. But um, going back to your issue, absolutely, your point, I should say, absolutely agree. California, a lot of people are naysayers, a lot of people are down on it, um, but California does present an opportunity precisely because no one wants to touch it. So it is one of the first for young investors. I'd say this as well. It's one of the first opportunities that you're going to have to get your flag, kind of
Mhm.
planted in California assets.
Yeah, it's so interesting to look at what has to go in to make a deal work in California comparative to other places. Because I was just looking at a deal for a personal investment for myself where it was a triplex in a Echo Park Silver Lake area.
Great.
And we're kind of working on it now. I'm running the numbers, doing this.
Okay.
The rents are $3,000 for the whole building.
Oh,
Super low.
wow.
So
Okay.
it's a 2-bedroom, a 1-bedroom, and a studio. So at market rate, we're probably looking at $3,500, $2,500, and $2,000, right? So $8,000 monthly, they're making $3,000. My mind is immediately like, okay, wow, there's a lot of value to be had there.
Right.
So I'm walking through this and I'm looking at the deal. The tenants are paying such low
Low
rent
rent.
compared to market that likely, unless there was some motivation for them to leave,
Never.
why would they?
Never.
Right? $100,000.
Entrenched.
Why would
Yeah.
they leave? It just wouldn't make
Right.
sense. However, there's an opportunity if I was to buy it with an owner user move in.
That's
right. Because if I'm going to move into the unit, then by law, I'm allowed to take over one of the units, which means one of the tenants has to move out.
Right.
And so we were running the numbers and math of what that has to do. But for me, there's a sacrifice in that I work in Century City.
Driving all the way to Silver Lake.
Yeah, how
Echo
much?
Park.
What's the hour time limit
Right.
there? And then from the cash perspective,
Right.
this actually was a very well priced deal, and we're going back and forth on offers. So I don't know where it's going to land, but I was running the numbers at, let's say, 10% above where the asking price was. And doing the math of, okay, if I get a loan for this amount of money, from a friend, all cash, so we were competitively close. And then I move in, that increases the NOI. Then I go get a loan to pull them out, right? And I have to
Right.
stay in there for 2 years.
Right.
So we're looking at all these different scenarios of what
Right.
has to happen
Right.
for the deal to make sense.
Also, you have to be careful which unit you actually kick out. You
Yes.
can't kick out the one paying the least amount.
Yes, correct. And so all these nuances stacked on top of each other, right? It is brain damage, and it's a lot tougher than saying, "Hey, your rent next month
By
is
the way,
gonna
it's
be."
tougher than it was just 5 years ago. The same exercise would have been
Yes.
easy. I'm gonna buy it. I'll figure it out.
100%.
Right.
It's not the same as I in my time being in real estate, it's completely different. But I had specific knowledge where I knew the scenarios of what could be done,
Yes.
right? Another person who is looking at an investment and sees a cheap property in California, maybe they buy it and they don't have the specific knowledge of, okay, how can I make this deal actually work? What's my A plan? What's my B plan? What's my C plan?
Yes.
They're like, A plan, okay, I'm going to increase the rents. Oh, well, actually, sorry, you're not going to
You
do that.
can't do that.
Oh, I'm going to buy them out. Well, actually, they're not going to move, right?
You would be shocked at how many investors come to California not realizing. Well, now it's a lot more, I think, broadly, known that we've got so much regulation and rent control. Uh, I was speaking to a colleague of mine who was a specialist in landlord-tenant issues and eviction issues and the like, and he said he got a call from investors out of Florida that decided to buy, I don't know, I think it was a 100-room key hotel with long-term stay tenants in West Hollywood. This is maybe about 15 years ago.
Mhm.
And they didn't realize until after they closed that it was rent controlled, West Hollywood. And they're trying to get tenants out, and they're like, "Well, you can't get us out. We're rent controlled. You've gotta, buy us out or, something like that." So this is a long time ago, and
Wow.
it became this really funny thing where he's telling the story about how he had to go in there. At this point, you have, and we're LA. Yeah, there are used cameras in front of the guy, the hotel, and it's the evil landlord doing
Yeah.
the evil thing,
Uh-huh.
right? So again, opportunity, right? If you are someone who is, and this is why I teach.
Yeah.
If you have the skill sets, the knowledge base to navigate these matters, like you have so beautifully and elegantly said, I can do this, I can do a buyout, I can not do a buyout because there's an exception for the owner user to move in, and that only applies for 4 units or less, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Knowing how to navigate that does allow for opportunities, and that's where the investment needs to be made. Real estate used to be a real cowboy business. Literally, like you'd go out to Vegas and like, I see a piece of land, I'm just going to buy it. The strip's catching up,
Yeah. It'll
and
get to me.
yeah, and a lot of guys did and still own that plot of land that was
They're
$100,000 that's now $8 million, right? That level of real estate play is really from a different generation.
Yeah.
The current generation of real estate play is exactly what you hit on, is getting really adept at what the
Value
landscape
add.
is. Yeah, and knowing that, how you can extract that value. So knowing, what can you use for density if you're gonna develop something?
So I want to talk about that. Where do you think the opportunities are in Los Angeles? If you're investing your own money, which we're talking about buying deals, like
Yeah.
where are the opportunities in
I am
California?
investing my own money. So just for anyone who's listening to this, I am from here. My house almost burned down. I'm not leaving. I'm staying in California. I hate the tax structure. I'm still staying here. The surf is better in other places, but I'm still staying here. Just by way of example, it's just a lifestyle thing.
Mhm.
So with that said, there are opportunities, and some of the opportunities that I personally think are on the horizon has to do with, look, we're contrarian, right? Essentially, that's what you're talking about. What's the worst asset type you can think of right now? Office.
Yeah.
What is the worst places you can think of going for office? It's
Downtown.
downtown's tough. It's going to continue to be tough. Um, I think some suburbs are being impacted from
Mhm.
office. Vacancies just sucking wind.
Mhm.
So I think that the opportunity is going to be actually in buying asset types that are functionally obsolete, not just office, but all kinds of
Sure.
functionally obsolete asset types, and converting them. And I think that that's tough because you have to find that, like, that real, diamond in the rough, because you've got to have the right light, right layout, parking ideally. But what's happening in the future is there's going to be a new adaptive reuse ordinance coming, and this has been on the come for a long time. One of the things that helped transform downtown LA, but then our politicians again fucked that up too, was the adaptive reuse ordinance in 1999 that allowed us to be able to take these old 1920s buildings in the old part of the downtown area and the old bank district and the historic core and convert them to multifamily and live work lofts and hotels and that kind of a thing. We used to have a adaptive reuse czar in the city of LA that was appointed by the mayor at the time, by Vergosa, I believe. Mayor Vergosa appointed him. And shout out to Hamid. He was wonderful. He would talk to developers. He'd engage with you, and that is really what, along with the CCA's support, helped downtown to turn around. With a new adaptive reuse ordinance that hopefully expands throughout the city, so that it's not specific to downtown or parts of Hollywood as it was originally, then, or San Pedro, then what we will have is, I think, a lot more by right conversion opportunities. A lot more housing can come out of things that really should have never been built, or that were built as office that maybe don't make sense as that, or maybe industrial that maybe is again functionally obsolete, or the like. So I think that'll be an opportunity. Um,
Isn't that super tough?
yes, super tough. It's tough, tough, tough. I don't want it to sound like it's easy.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
Structures the way offices are built too. This is what I've heard and spoken to people of. Even if you got the office for free, right? The conversion costs and the way that they're structured with the outside and the quarter, just the way that they're built.
Some buildings will just never make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Correct.
You gotta
So you blow it up. And so that's absolutely correct, and oftentimes the right way to go.
yeah.
It's finding, again, those diamonds in the rough where, you know what, it's got character, it's got something unique, and maybe it does make sense because, you know what, the layout, the bay depths aren't deep, they're not shotgun units. Most importantly, the only thing that matters, basis. Can you get it for cheap enough?
Mm.
And that's going to be the challenge. Some of the stuff in the office realm is getting cheap enough where you're going to get there. There's room to go. And the other thing, opportunity-wise, let me say this.
Yeah.
One, adaptive use. Yes, to your point, that's a caveat. That's a risk factor. It's not going away. Adaptive use is one of the hardest things to do at the same time. So yes, it's an opportunity, but it's also the risk factor is one of the most difficult things. The other thing is there is no shortage of defaults that are hitting. Lenders are sitting on non-performing loans. I have someone that came to my office just the other day who's been having conversations with a lot of lenders, and they're coming. They're trickling down.
Oh,
So there's stuff that's going to be coming, I think.
is it a wave or is it a drip?
Right now it's a drip, but I think it's a dam that has a drip that's going to let loose.
Got it. Interesting.
And I think that we're going to see opportunities to buy notes again, like we did in 2008, 9, 10, 11. I think that we're going to see opportunities in the foreclosure realm. I've already seen, that happening in the single family residential market,
Yeah.
right, which is one of the tightest markets we have. So that's the next thing around the corner, I think, is opportunities to buy things that are on a discounted note basis, or especially, and again, office. Like, think about how many office buildings that were pre-COVID, maybe 100% occupied. Now they're maybe 50% occupied. They're going to be facing maturity defaults just by virtue of the fact that cap rates went from 6 cap for office to, this is a great one. I mean, is it 10, 12 caps? Right? So
Yeah.
something that was worth maybe $90 million is now worth $45 million. And good luck getting $45 million, because your debt service coverage ratio doesn't even get you to 1.2 at $45 million.
Yeah. So, jeez. Okay. So, notes and stuff like that. Have you had experience with that? Because that's something that's quite interesting to me. Because again, I wasn't in the business in 2008, 2009, when all the great financial crisis happened. I know people made a boatload of money.
Yes.
How do you prepare? And if I'm an investor and I say, hey, I want to get ready to buy some notes, and 2008, 2009, this is my moment.
Yeah.
How do you prepare? What do you do? What are the steps to take to actually make that happen?
There are funds that have been created specifically to, kind of pursue these kinds of assets. Having cash available, if you're a private investor, have that cash available. Have the resources with people who have, or if not the direct relationships, have connect with people who have those tentacles at these various banks, and
Mhm.
often they're regional banks, they're small banks you may have never even heard of, and try to build those relationships. Have the cash, build those relationships, because I'm starting to see them. The other issue then is know your markets. The third thing, knowing your markets, has to do with, what is a deal? You can have your cash, be told that there's a deal, and it's sitting you in the face, and you're like, I don't know. Is this like, do I do this or do I not do this? So also know your market, do your analysis. As these come, they're going to go quickly. So that when you do see something, you'll be that person who knows that it's a deal. Whether it's knowing your market, knowing your asset type, knowing, you know, uh, real estate is such a micro uh, market based industry. Just be the expert in that niche. As you know this, you do this
Of
well.
course. You have to have specific knowledge to be able to take
Yeah.
advantage. There's too many smart people
Yes.
in this world for you to not to think you can beat
Right.
someone who's smarter than you
Right.
or who's done more of that situation. So, I'm curious to know because, again, haven't done this necessarily a bunch. Are you getting the opportunities directly from the lenders? Are these going on the open market? Or do they have to be a public auction? Like, what is
It's
the
a great
actual
question. So
details of it?
the reason that I say that it's a trickle,
Yeah.
a lot of these are not hitting the market yet. What I'm seeing are kind of pre-marketed
Mhm.
opportunities. There are also, because they're pre-marketed, they're also par opportunities for the most part. So you're not going to get,
They're not
those like,
steals.
yeah, you're not going to get things that are going to excite you. You're going to see a lender that maybe put a loan out at whatever amount, and they're saying, okay, we need this off our balance sheet. We'll give it to you at par. Well, it's not worth a par, and they're in
Mhm.
denial. They want to, they want to just clean it up from a regulatory standpoint,
Yeah.
their balance sheet, and we're looking at it from a real estate standpoint, saying, good luck with that sale at par because it's worth, maybe 75% of what you lent on it,
Yeah.
right? So, that's why it's a trickle for now, and I think once that kind of gets more en masse and then it becomes a national narrative about, things that are happening, then again, the supply and demand narrative is gonna push, there's gonna be so much, coming to market. People are gonna then push the prices down because there aren't so many people who either have done note purchases or have the appetite to, do you buy the note and then foreclose? Do you work with the borrower? They have to get their kind of
Mm.
storyline straight too, right? Do you want to be perceived as the Starwood, lender who's, lend to own? Or are you
Mhm.
gonna be the guy who's gonna like, work with the borrower? And I know what I would do, and everyone's gonna figure out their own, kind of approach and business model around that issue.
So I just saw a video that of President Trump, the current president, saying that he thinks interest rates are going to come down. And someone asked him, are you going to be, I forget exactly what it was, but like, do you think the Fed's going to listen to you? And he jokingly or realistically said yes. I'm curious to know if you think that interest rates are going to come down, if that makes sense. And if they do, what are the ramifications of that?
Two things. Thank you for okay. It doesn't make economic sense because the Federal Open Market Committee is a different entity, private entity, non-governmental, and the US government, the president cannot tell the head of the Federal Open
Yeah.
Market Committee
Jay
what to
Powell.
do. Yes. And so, and also they are also controlling, treasury rates. So it's a very different thing that what we use to, now, borrow against, what's your index, right? Sure. SOFR kind of tracks the treasuries. You've got different indexes that will kind of trail, but I don't think, number one, as much as I want to say that interest rates are going to go down, it's going to be driven by the markets. We're seeing the 10-year kind of dip a little bit. Shorter
Mhm.
terms are still staying high. It's kind of cruising right around that. At the end of the day, if you're doing, let's say, agency debt financing for multifamily, you're going to be right above that 6.25 percent mark. Everyone's waiting. I have been
Feels like what, 2
watching.
years?
Yeah, everyone's waiting. Everyone's just waiting, wanting to see that kind of dip, and no one's been really seeing it meaningfully come back to, kind of those, call it pre-2000, what are we in, 22 numbers?
Yeah.
We're not there.
Yeah, 25. Jeez, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
right? So I don't think that we're going to see a low interest rate environment anytime soon. Certainly, some of the other things that the federal government will be doing, with tariffs and,
What do you mean by low? Like, where do you think they sit? 5.5? 5?
I think that if we're talking about low is going to be 5.5.
Low is 5.5.
Low would be 5.5
Interesting.
in my mind's eye. If you get anything in the fives, I think you're going to see a lot of people refinancing
Yeah.
and locking in.
Yeah. Long-term 10-year money.
Correct.
Interesting. That's so you think
So
that
think about that. All of those deals that sold for 3.5 caps or 4.
Oh, yeah, trust me. I'm
They've got
I'm
those.
I'm talking to him. I'm saying like, "Hey, we got some loans coming due, man.
Yeah.
Like, hey, were you able to get those tenants out?
Right.
How's the NOI looking?" Right?
Yeah.
Because if you haven't, like, you're not feeling great.
And go back to what we said earlier. We've got regulatory issues. That NOI has not shifted maybe more than 3, 4, 5% over the last 2, 3 years.
Yeah. No. And that I felt that way too for a while, and I was surprised that it wasn't as prevalent as maybe it seemed to be, or I thought it was going to be. And I don't know if that was the banks kind of kicking the can down the road. People were
Sure.
able to negotiate a little bit, and
definitely banks are kicking their can.
and you feel like they can't kick the can any further.
I think we're getting on the precipice of them saying, okay, we need to start, getting rid of some of this stuff. There are going to be just, again, maturity defaults. Some people are going to not be able to
Yeah.
do the capital call, and they're going to be, so some of the banks might work with the better operators and say, okay, we'll extend you, do some financial engineering.
Sure.
Those will be probably more the regionals. The big banks forget about it. CMBS forget about it. The CMBS, debt that comes due,
Mhm.
that's a whole wave of pain, and notorious for, CMBS market's notorious for rigidity, right? Whatever the loan documents say is what they have to do, and that's what, the special servicer is going to hold your feet to at the end of the day. So you do have some well-capitalized CMBS borrowers, so maybe they'll be able to buy their notes back, and execute some unique, innovative strategies for something that maybe is functionally obsolete. But I think the majority of that market is going to come to market.
How do you get ahead of it as an investor? What specifically do you do to say, okay, let's identify potentially some opportunities, or can you get ahead of it? Like, what is your strategy?
Yeah, there are databases that track CMBS maturities, and so you can get those database,
What is it? RCA? Capital Analytics?
That's
Yeah.
right. And so from Capital Analytics, you can identify your market, you can identify your region, and they'll share with you whether they're performing or non-performing notes. And that's certainly something that people have done. That's coming out of the 2008, 2009 playbook.
But that's public. I mean, it's information, right? So there's not this competitive nature, or there's not a competitive advantage very much, because that information is kind of public.
Yes.
So I always lean to relationships.
Always.
That
First.
is the differentiation. In fact.
Absolutely.
And the more you've been in the business, the longer you've experienced what a relationship, how strong that is. It just further solidifies in my brain of how important it is.
I can't stress that enough. And working with someone, I think about this quite often, working with someone that you like, that you trust, and you have faith in, those three elements are really the differentiator.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, we almost have perfect information now in this digital age. Everyone can find anything that they want out. But then let's say you find something out. Who do you want to take that deal to? Whether it's on the equity side or the debt side or the brokerage side, right? Do you want to work with someone who's brain damaged, or do you want to work with someone that you're like, you know what? I trust him. I know I'm going to give him the deal. He's going to do right by me. He's going to do everything. He's up at 5 a.m.,
4:35.
4:35, sorry. And point being that, we work with people that we trust and can really align with. And so, that's your personal brand, right? And you're doing a great job with that, by the way.
Thank you.
And I think that that's really, for a lot of my students, they're trying to figure that out, right? Like, how do I find my way? Be smart, learn, right? And I think that's, and really, when you know your craft well, it shows. People want to. When I first met you, actually, I should tell you this. You were really green, and you were with the senior,
Mm-hmm.
and just how you dressed, how you introduced yourself, how you, with confidence, approached, even though you didn't know a lot at that
I didn't know
time,
shit, man.
you didn't let it on,
Yeah.
right? And so that, though,
Yes.
is the secret sauce
Mm.
that a lot of people don't know. I'm giving you kudos to you.
No, I
I'm giving you
appreciate
the
it.
love because you deserve it, and you've been a success at what you do,
Thank you.
and you found a niche, and you found that a lot of people can rely on you and can, benefit from your knowledge, and you're doing a great job of sharing that knowledge now too, right?
Yeah.
So that's beautiful.
And that's actually something, I'd love to get your opinion on this too, because most of my job is relationships. It's really is. It's knowledge, gathering information, knowledge, and then disseminating it and to people that adds value to them. So I'm constantly thinking about ways that I can either improve that, allow for more detailed, more unique, pulling from different sources and being able to share something with an owner, right? To build that
Yeah.
relationship,
Yeah.
to give them value. What do you teach your students? And I guess how would you go about if you were starting, how would you build your network from zero to being in a place where it is today? Or if you had to start over, what would the steps you would do to actually
Mm.
build like a ironclad network?
It's a great question. Uh, as a young attorney, I wouldn't do any networking. It's just not the ethos that you think of as an attorney, which is the biggest, I think, misstep that you can make. Real estate brokerage, quite different. That's all you're kind of taught to do,
Yeah.
is to socialize, right? Uh, so I think that that's one of the things. What I like to tell my students is, well, I'll step back and say that first thing is you need to understand the fundamentals on how to do a deal. I say this to my students as well. You would be shocked how many attorneys come out of law school who do not understand how to do a deal. You think that, oh, he's an attorney, he's done a deal. But when you come out of law school, you don't know how to do a deal. A lot of my students, the way I teach my class, are taught the whole life cycle of a deal. And the idea is, it's not like, okay, we're going to do an offer today, tomorrow we're going to do this. It's putting them in a kind of a uh, life cycle of a real
Hmm.
estate deal, so that they see all of these nuances, but then they can step back and see how the deal kind of came to, focus. And so number one is to know the art of being able to do a deal. Number two is, once you are competent at that, it is there in confidence. It's there in how you are able to communicate. So then that is where you start, when you're socializing,
Hmm.
people again pick up on these little cues, social cues, business cues, and that's where you will get these phone calls. Hey, Taylor, do you know anyone? Even though it's not your niche, do you know any single family residences in the Palisades fire or Altoona fires? And then you educate. It becomes an educational opportunity as well.
Hmm.
Well, no, Joe, I don't. But also, right now is early. Right now, the GRE is not allowing us to solicit. So, cool your fucking horses,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 100%. No, it's, I obsess about this kind of stuff because it is so tied into my job. And I love actually talking to college students or young people who are interested in the brokerage business because I just obsess over how to optimize what we do. And it may go on deaf ears because with AI and everything where we're headed, I don't know what that's going to look like. But the one thing I do know is
Yeah.
that relationships are still going to be very, very strong. And there's going to be this human element because we are humans that we want to experience something that is also inherently human.
Absolutely.
And so, how do you build relationships through value? What can I do with my specific knowledge and to give people something where it feels like this? There's I want that relationship, right? I see value in that. Not just because they're nice to me or
Sure.
because they,
Yeah.
compliment me, but there's something that I get from that
Right.
that
Yeah.
I need. I want that to be around in my circle.
Well, you hit on something that's really, unique also. You have aptitude. You have aptitude for socialization, communication. Uh, some people have people have different aptitudes, right? Some people don't have that aptitude set, right? Some people might be fucking amazing at numbers. They're they don't want to talk to anyone.
Hmm.
That student, and there's some students who are like that, or some people in real estate that are like that. They are, people that I love to work with because they're your Excel gurus,
Wizards, man.
underwriting gurus. I'll be able to say, look, I need this sources and uses to be broken down into X, Y, and Z and A, B, and C, and I needed to do this. And 5 minutes later, he's like, done. And they get off on the challenges there,
Yeah.
right? That's exciting to them. And so it's knowing your aptitudes, because you can be an engineer type and you can be a reformed child actor and do well in real estate. It's
Mhm.
depending on, those skill sets that you kind of extract out of your, kind of soul
Yeah.
and then direct into where you fit well within that life cycle of a deal.
Well, you know so well because you've talked and been in the business for a long time with many brokers. There's a million and one different personalities
Oh,
when it
yes.
comes to brokers.
Yes.
And brokers talk too, and we're like, man, that guy is strange, but he sure does a lot of deals.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And you're like, it's because there's this specific thing about him that is better and whatever that is than a lot of other people. And other investors and home and apartment owners recognize that.
That's right.
And there's value that they're getting from that,
Absolutely
right?
right.
So I agree with you completely. If you can identify your strengths and then support your weaknesses through people and
Absolutely.
partnerships and things like that,
Absolutely.
that is going to be giving you the best chance to succeed in a business that is very much a meritocracy.
Let me ask you a question. Did you have a mentor?
Yes.
That is also a differentiator.
Yeah. Huge.
Huge.
I-
So
I would not be here without my mentor.
absolutely. And that is something that is important, I think, if you're starting out. I think for even, seasoned professionals to have a cohort, at least, that they
I
meet
still
with.
crave that.
Yeah,
I still crave
absolutely.
running stuff by someone and being like, hey, am I thinking about this the right way?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that's really, really important about real estate. You can't do deals as a lone wolf. Think about all the elements that come together in a deal.
Yeah.
You've got the other side. You've got yourself having to think about the deal metrics. You have to think about the debt, the equity. You have to think about the demographic you're going into. Think about the asset type you're buying. So these are all like decision nodes. There are like 5,000 decision nodes before you even put your first offer out, and you're doing it all within your head.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have someone to, who's got your back, who's got your best interests, to be able to share that information with.
That's a big fallacy that I've experienced personally myself and that I see in other people is this lone wolf mentality of I'm going to figure it out. And there's almost a little bit of, because we're commission based too, there's a level of greed and understanding how you get paid,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Because every person you bring into a deal, effectively you're making less money.
Right. It's almost competitive, right? It's a competitive.
What's the least amount of resources I need
Right.
to put in to get the most out?
Correct.
And I've seen that go bad so many times because there's this level of not understanding that just, some of a little bit of something is better than
Correct. Zero of a million.
of a million,
Yeah.
100%.
Right.
And so I think that can be a trap for a lot of people who haven't experienced what
Absolutely.
it's like.
Absolutely.
And personally too, like we're all human. I want to be able to go on vacation for 2 weeks and not have to worry about my email 100% and respond to these things because I just saw another video about basically what they did was they would call up former clients and ask them like, hey, what do you like about my services? And they would tell them, oh, you respond really quickly. And what the guy was saying was that of what they said they like about you, that's what they value in you, right? And so he was like, perfect. What I know that they value in me, if I can improve that, then that will deepen the value that they perceive from me.
Totally. Yeah.
And so it's so interesting to be able to identify what other people value in you so that you can go and say, okay, how can I improve on that which they seem to be valuable?
Resonating with.
Yeah, because if you don't
Exactly.
know what they seem,
Yeah.
if you thought it was because you were, charming or handsome or, you always called them and gave them some comp or something like that, but really they like that you responded to their emails.
Yeah.
Well, then just respond to their emails quicker or faster or more.
Right.
That's what they really care about and to focus on. And I love finding those little nuggets
Right.
because we have so many open loops
Right.
all the time. You have open loops
Sure.
in your professional career,
Absolutely.
in your professorial career, and your personal life. There's
Absolutely.
all these
Absolutely.
open loops that
That's right.
if you don't close or find ways to make them actually happen, it can drive you crazy.
Oh, and look, and it's so easy to let something just go latent, right? And you're just kind of like doing this thing on the right, and then maybe you're like,
Yeah,
"Oh, let me come
story
back
of
to
my
this
life.
later." Yeah, and so
Joseph, story of my life.
you you're fragmented,
There's
right?
too many
There are too many
things.
things going on. So, um, it's having the principle, having routine. That's what we talk about.
Yeah.
Routine is so important because, you're checking off those things. You're keeping track. You're keeping metrics. Um, it's like and that's, by the way, why I love working or hiring former athletes like yourself.
Yeah.
And we need to talk about you because kudos to you for that as well. Baseball player and
Thank you.
being you were All American, right?
At high school.
High school All
Yeah.
American, right? So it like when you deal with someone who's been in a team environment, they understand it on a different level.
Yeah.
It's no different.
Yeah. It's I want to hop into the principle, like the real estate side of what you're doing right now. We were talking about adaptive reuse, but talk to me a little bit about what you're doing on a real estate side of things,
Sure.
what the day job is,
Yeah, yeah.
and then, give me the scenario.
Over the years, I've been involved with various family offices. I'm running right now a high net worth family office in Beverly Hills, and we're about $1 billion of assets under management, assets that are Class A locations,
Okay.
assets that a lot of people would recognize if we were to list them off.
Have they owned them for a very long time?
Yes, most of them been in the portfolio for over 20 years. So we're going through issues that we deal with in the family
Yeah. What do
environment.
yeah, what is it? That's a great
The
question.
issues that a family office environment typically deal with are there's one thing is the real estate, just organically speaking. The real estate is obviously um, the end all and be all. But then, a family office environment requires a lot of patience because you overlay on top of that family dynamics, intergenerational dynamics, uh, partnership dynamics, whether they're joint ventures or, kind of individual investors who've kind of come in and bolted onto the family office and investing on an LP basis. And so that requires a lot of maneuvering, and it
Mhm.
requires a lot of decision making that sometimes isn't just based off of the real estate's needs, if that makes sense.
Got it.
So it is a environment that requires creativity often. It requires patience always, and we have now because we've got intergenerational issues. We are looking at repositioning some of the assets and maybe exiting some of the assets, and what do we reharvest that capital into as we 1031 exchange out.
And is that coming from the matriarch or patriarch, or is that coming from the next generation who is young and hungry and wants to go and grow the portfolio or diversify? And, maybe the baton has been passed down.
Yeah.
And again, I know it's different for each scenario.
It is. So some are very hierarchical family office
Yeah.
wise, where you've got like, the patriarch who's, the godfather. Um, the environment that I navigate through right now is quite a level,
Mm,
environment. We have uh, often, input. And one of the things I've been brought in as a non-family member is to bring more institutional experience and more kind of a broad-based, sense of understanding of real estate, the law, the markets, and give advice. So what I do is I'm a consigliere. I'm sitting there and listening, giving advice, telling them what I would do in their circumstances, bringing up issues for them to think about financially, from a tax
mhm.
standpoint, from a intergenerational standpoint. I see the family as my kind of constituents, right? How do I get assets from the one generation to the
Mhm.
next, and how do we keep growing the portfolio for the benefit of the third generation down the line?
For sure. Yeah. So it's a lot of strategy,
A lot
I
of strategy
imagine.
on the daily.
move this lever, pull this here, do this, right? And so, wow, that could be very intense too, because it's great to have all this stuff, but all that stuff can go away,
Oh, yeah,
if
you don't take it with you. Newsflash.
Yeah.
If you pass away, your real estate's
Yeah.
not coming.
Yeah, it's not coming, right? So you got
Tutankhamun tried that. It didn't go well.
Yeah, no, I know, right? Now they're just buried underneath in it.
Pyramids.
That's so interesting, the dynamics. And I've always known, obviously, the family offices that we've call, and they have different deal metrics, right? So what's very unique about the different ICPs, or the different personalities of the types of investors in real estate. You have the mom and pop investors, you have the syndicators, you have the family office, and you have the institutional. That's kind of the 4 buckets that I put people into, right?
Very well done.
And deals that will fit each individual person, or each individual bucket of people, because of either the location.
That's right.
Where a syndicator is not going to buy a 3 cap, even if it's in Beverly Hills, just because they can't sit on it for 10 years and make it work out. But
we will.
a family office can buy a property.
Because their time horizon's infinity.
Yeah.
And, in the long run, everything makes sense.
Yeah.
So we tend to go for very well located assets. Now, we won't necessarily in this market buy a 3 cap. I'm
Sure.
being a little facetious.
Yes.
But, we can go into things that are better located, more sexy, if you will.
Yeah.
Than, when out in my syndicator life, there's no way I'd do any deals in Beverly Hills.
Yeah. Yeah, the returns doesn't make
10
sense.
caps don't exist.
Yeah, they really don't.
Yeah.
Unless you buy the Louis Vuitton building and then flip it to Louis Vuitton next day, then have a pretty good deal.
Yeah, that's also some inside.
Yeah, exactly. The inside information, right?
Yes,
Is
exactly.
this business is still one of who has the most information,
Right.
who can take advantage of.
And it's legal. We're not talking about the Securities
No.
and Exchange Commission. We're talking about, getting that competitive advantage in a way that you can actually trade on it.
Yeah, completely. Before we wrap up, Joseph, I want to talk about what's next for you, what you're excited about, and obviously dealing with a lot of this stuff. Like, how do you see the next 12, 24 months looking like for you specifically?
Oh, gosh. I think the next 24 months, we are going to go through, it's funny, I said 2025 is the year of the upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we're going to find ourselves getting into new asset types. We're going to be exchanging out of some of the assets that we've had, legacy assets for, decades. I think we're going to be getting into some new deals in new markets that we've not been involved with. And so that's exciting, going to new markets, and, that ramp up in terms of learning curve is always fun for me personally. And there's going to be a lot of rebuilding. We're from a personal standpoint, we're going to see, I think, the Palisades going back to the fires, and Malibu. It's an upgrade in terms of that as well. Homes are going to be upgraded. They're going to be better than they were before. Palisades, downtown Palisades is obliterated. Well, the upside is we're going to get new grocery stores and new coffee shops and new banks. So there are always silver linings. There's always the green, sprouts that come up after the ash and all the burnouts. So I look forward to looking at the hills that have all been burned and seeing green and seeing green grass and beauty, again, return to our beautiful communities.
That's beautiful. Joseph, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
That's fun.